Well, we're going to begin our conversation, and I want to thank you all for joining us here today. Okay, that's what we're testing out. Thank you. How's that? That's what we'll do. Thank you. So I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We're going to have a very casual conversation with author Jeff LaHurd and talk about his most recent book that has been published, which is called The North Tamiami Trail. You can see mine is already dog-eared and marked. So
you got yours free.
So my name is Lori Muldowney, and I'm here. Jeff and I have known one another for a long time. We worked together, toiled at Sarasota County Department of Historical Resources for
Toiled might be a stretch.
for innumerable years. I'm on the board of directors of the Sarasota Alliance for Historic Preservation, and we worked with Jeff to write this book and publish this book. And so this really is a wonderful moment in time. The manuscript was completed several years ago, and then, you know, with our world changing, it wasn't a top priority. So I'm really glad that we got around to publishing the book. I want to recognize one of our board members, Tom McCardle, who's here with us and did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting the book published. I recognize a lot of familiar faces. Our old friend, my old friend Joyce Waterbury is here, who's a former member of the board of directors of the Sarasota Alliance. And so without further ado, let me introduce Jeff LaHurd.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to see so many people here. Lori was telling me the last time we had a book signing, 3 people showed up. My mother, my daughter, and some guy that wandered in off the street because they thought there was free wine here. So it is really gratifying to see so many people. I came up with the idea for this particular book. I've done 17 or 18 books, which might be kind of a misnomer because I discovered early on, if you change the title of a book, you could bring it out twice. So like I did, one book was called Sarasota Then and Now, and I just reversed it and called it Sarasota Now and Then. And then I cut it in half and called it Sarasota Now, and then 6 months later, Sarasota Then. So it's easier to do it that way. In my first book, I think was 4 pages, including the covers. So anyway, I came up with this idea for this book, which is North Tamiami Trail, a Drive Through History, which will be out in 6 months as North Tamiami Trail, a walk through history. But anyways, I was sitting in traffic at that Fruitville circle, you know, Ontario guy in front of me, Michigan guy behind me, we're all waiting to go across the bridge. And I was looking around and it just struck me how historically important that particular stretch of highway is. I mean, if you start at the bayfront, that's where the Scott colony walked ashore in 1885. And they were expecting to find a little Scotland here, but they just found a wilderness. I mean, they've been dumped in the middle of nowhere. And they knew it as soon as they pulled into the bay. And then if you keep going further north, you go to the county line, then you come to SRQ, which used to be the Sarasota Army Air Base. So we had a lot of, I think 3,500 soldiers training here. And then in between, the street was originally platted as Banana Avenue because they wanted the Scott colony to think they could easily become gentlemen farmers. Because that's why the streets are named after fruits: Orange Avenue, lime, lemon, and banana, kumquat even. But during the 1920s, when things were really starting to move, they decided banana wasn't a very attractive name for a main thoroughfare. So they changed it to Broadway. And it stayed Broadway for quite a number of years. So between the bay and, as I said, the airport, all along the way you have different architectural gems, like the Belhaven Inn is still with us. I hope they save it. The Sarasota Times building, which is a restaurant, is still with us. They were designed by Dwight James Baum, who also designed the Sarasota County Courthouse. Now, he came down at the behest of John Ringling to design Katazan, and he just became one of Sarasota's most prolific architects. Along the way, because I'm kind of rambling, if there's any questions about this aspect of Sarasota or any aspect, just feel free to raise your hand or call it out.
So I was looking through the book, and I love the some of the prose that was used in the newspaper of the time. You know, it was just a different way of writing and speaking. I think it's always so lovely to look back. And one of the nice things about Jeff's books is that he relies a lot on the newspaper, and we have a lot of direct quotes from some of the period papers. So I'm looking at some of the fanfare that was in the press that surrounded the opening of the Tamiami Trail. And it is described as in anticipation of the opening of the trail, the newspaper promised motorists one of the finest drives in all America when coming from Tampa and St. Petersburg in the winter. That was a little bit premature because the road was not actually done in the winter, but finally on Wednesday, April 25, 1928, a caravan of nearly 200 automobiles left Tampa for the official maiden journey. And it was called the greatest road celebration ever staged in the South. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, you know, I too fell in love with the prose of the Roaring Twenties in particular, because if you recall at that time, they really didn't have color photography. So when they wrote things, they wrote with really colorful prose, and they would pull all the stops. And I thought to myself, I wish I could write like that, but it doesn't matter because they did, and I'll just copy their stuff. But yeah, they did have a singular way of writing, and you know, there was nothing that they could write that would seem to embarrass them. I mean, it was just like amazing stuff.
Yeah. So if we go forward a little bit, so it opened in 1928. A lot of, and there are some buildings that remain from that era, but when I think of the Tamiami Trail, I mostly think of the post-World War II boom that Sarasota experienced and the buildings that still remain from that era. And so there are some amazing numbers that we look at when we think about what happened in Sarasota after World War II. You know, of course, we had a building boom, the public school system, a lot of churches, a lot of the early malls, drive-in theaters. America was simply on the move all over the country. And what we were seeing here was mirrored in many other communities. But there are some interesting statistics here. In 1946, there were 5,400 rooms for tourists. And by 1956, so 10 years later, that number had increased to 13,000. So it almost tripled in the 10 years between 46 and 56, as did the restaurants. They increased from 126 restaurants with a seating capacity of 5,000 to 300 restaurants, again, more than doubling 10 years later, with the ability to serve 15,000 patrons. That's a lot of green Jello, man.
Yeah. Sarasota, many of you may already know this, but Sarasota really came into its own in about 4 years during the 1920s. And one attorney who lived here at the time said it was like lightning struck. And everywhere you wanted to look, new buildings were going up, where at one time it was just forest or green space. You can't have green space in Sarasota anymore. But anyways, they were just popping up all over: churches, schools, buildings, banks, everything necessary for a bona fide city came into being within about 4 years. And then everything kind of stopped. With the real estate bust at September of 1926, it was like somebody threw a switch and building almost completely stopped. We had some works progress administration buildings like the Municipal Auditorium, the Sarasota, today the Sarasota Bradenton Airport, the post office. So there was some, the Lido Casino. So those are the buildings that kind of helped us through. And then, of course, the Depression followed, and World War II followed that. So everything, my parents moved here in 1950, and they could have moved here in 1925, and it would have been the same town. It was amazing. And so after World War II, then we had the second real boom with servicemen coming home and housing developments opening up for them. And the difference was during the boom years, it was mostly speculation. You know, people came down here to buy a piece of property and flip it. They would buy a piece of property in the morning, and they would a binder on a piece of property even, and then they would sell it to somebody at noon, and they would take that binder and raise the price, sell it to somebody else. So it could change hands 4 or 5 times a day, each time escalating in value. Well, the bust put an end to all of that. And so Sarasota truly kind of stagnated during the era until World War II was over.
Thank you, Jeff. So what we did, the Sarasota Alliance for Historic Preservation, was we thought it was important to include some maps in the book. And so they are towards the back of the book. And then just for kind of organizational purposes, and I think in some ways, at least for me, I've never lived along the trail, but it certainly does change character, you know, as it moves through residential neighborhoods and then gets more commercial. So we kind of organized the trail as from 10th Street north to Martin Luther King Jr. Way, which was formerly known as 27th Street. And then from 27th north to General Spatz Boulevard, as you were describing. So I was looking through this and just thinking maybe we could talk about a couple of the significant buildings on those eras.
Yeah.
Would you like to do that?
Well, one of the significant things, it wasn't a building, but in the mid-20s, they really desired to get a deep water port here in Sarasota. They wanted to see ocean-going vessels here, like in Miami or Jacksonville or wherever. So they owned the electric plant that the council did, the city, and they sold the electric plant for $1 million. And with that $1 million, they made the headquarters for ocean liners. And you know where 10th Street is today, where the boat launch is, that's where it was going to be. Ships would pull in there. And then the currents saw to it that didn't happen. Channel washed back in, and the dredge from that is what created Ken Thompson Parkway. It was a City Island Drive. I always get a message.
It's Island Park.
Island Park.
Yeah, right.
So the dredge created Island Park.
Right. So let's see, deity.
Well, yeah, we can talk about the Bay Haven Hotel.
Okay.
You know, John Ringling came to town in 1911, not to become involved in development, but just to have a place for relaxation from the rigors of the circus. And first they went to Tarpon Springs, but they were not welcome there. Circus people were not welcomed in Tarpon Springs with open arms. So they came to Sarasota. And when the real estate boom hit, he helped propel it. You know, what was good for Sarasota was good for John Ringling and vice versa. And So he's the one that really brought culture to Sarasota. And he opened up the museum naturally, but also the John and Mabel Ringling Art School, which is still there. I mean, it's just grown leaps and bounds. But the place where it originally started was on 27th Street, in what was called the Bay Haven Hotel. And that building is still there. And then, there's another little, probably about 6th Street. There's a group of historic buildings that have managed to remain. The Pagoda Hut, is that London?
Yes. Yep.
Sarasota of Architecture School member Victor Lundy.
Yep, the blue top.
Yeah. And then next to it, designed by Thomas Reed Martin, is the Chizzy Library. That's where Lori and I used to work together. And again, work is a stretch. That's where we used to put in our time. And then next, the Art Center, of course, from the 50s. And then the Municipal Auditorium, which was also designed by Thomas Reed Martin. And when it opened, it was built to give summer tourists more to do, as was the Lido Casino, which was torn down. And Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall, that was like considered radical, the design and the color. And one of the architects involved said, well, it's going to fade with age. So just go with us and, it'll be a beautiful building. And I think that reflects the beginning of today's Sarasota in a way, because the Lido Casino went down in 1969, which kind of typified yesterday's Sarasota. And then Van Wezel saw Sarasota as like a tipping point, as Mary would have said, to today. And another one would have been Bird Key. That's another tipping point when Arvida came to town in 1959. So.
Well, I'd say if there's a tipping point in town, it might be the Baha'i Hut up on the North Trail.
I tipped out of that a lot of times.
Jeff and I keep trying to remember where we first met.
Yeah.
But the Baha'i Hut, as many of you know, is up on the North Trail. And that too, that's featured in that second section of the book that I'm describing, where we talk about the properties which are north of Martin Luther King Drive. And so we've got the Baha'i Hut. Another good one, which has been empty for a long time, is the Melody Restaurant. Do you all remember the Melody? Oh my God. The Baha'i Hut is still there. I'll get an address for you. Yeah, it's part of the Golden Host Hotel, which is to the rear, and you don't see it very well because there's now a wall there. But the Baha'i Hut has trail frontage, and it's on the west side of the trail.
They used to have forever, the Baha'i Hut had an advertisement, ask Tommy about our Mai Tai. And if you drank 2 Mai Tais, you couldn't find your way out of the place. They were powerful drinks. And then when he left, his son Timmy was a bartender. And so.
Lori,
Yes.
it's worth mentioning that the Baha'i Hut and the Golden Host Resort, the owners have actually completed a renovation. And
They haven't sold it for another big
No,
okay.
they renovated the hotel and included period specific furnishings now. So it's been completely
How
done.
far up is it? Is it north of?
It's north of 27th Street, maybe a couple of miles on the left-hand side. Yeah.
I've probably seen it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't click.
Yeah, I'm looking at the map here, which is conveniently located in the back of the book. And it's on the west side of the trail, south of 46th Street, the Baha'i Hut. Yes, yes. And can we disclose that it has been nominated for an Historic Preservation Award this year? The awards committee will be looking over the nominations and making an announcement at the end of the month. So we're very tell them to have a Mai Tai. We had a happy hour there, to tell you the truth. Do you want to talk about maybe the Katazan or the camp?
Yes, it's not only all along the trail, but off of the trail, block or two. Katazan, for instance, Ringling wanted to be built to be pretentious. And Dwight James Baum, as I said, came down from New York and he designed it. I think originally Ringling was looking at Thomas Reed Martin to do it, but he wouldn't sharpen his pencil enough for John Ringling to want to pay him a commission. So Baum got it. And as I said, Baum did some of the most phenomenal places in Sarasota, Mediterranean revival places. And the home was actually built by Owen Burns, who did a lot of work in 1920s Sarasota. As a matter of fact, the Bellhaven apartments that are still there were owned by Owen Burns and designed by Baum.
Another great spot, Sarasota Jungle Gardens. I was there recently. They still have the same collection of birds and tricks, but it's an amazing place. That was actually established in the late 1930s, 49.
30, maybe 30.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was, it was, let's split the difference, early 1940s. So Sarasota Jungle Gardens is another one that is set off the trail,
Right.
but because they've had this notable sign on the trail for so many years, we included it in the book and as part of the experience. So let's see, are there any questions from the audience? How's everybody doing out there? We have such a wealth of knowledge here. I want to make sure we're addressing any questions that exist.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just curious. Ringling seems to concentrate on the Bayfront and Lido in developing
Right.
out that way. But did he have much influence on downtown?
No.
Could I ask you to repeat, Laurie, to repeat the questions?
Oh, good
Some of
idea.
the people on Zoom are saying they can't hear that.
Oh, of course, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, of course. The question is about John Ringling and
His influence on downtown Sarasota.
his influence on downtown Sarasota.
Well, he didn't have that much influence on downtown Sarasota. He had a bank where on 5 Points, there's a tennis shoe place there now. That was it was for Patrick's for a number of years, but his brother Charles had more of an influence downtown, I think. He built the Sarasota Terrace Hotel, which is a county administration building today. And I think out of the two brothers, Charles was the better liked on the circus lot. He was friendlier, less gruff, maybe less businesslike. And John Ringling was a tight-fisted businessman. And yet, yes,
Not a question, but was there a little bit of a connection between John Ringling and St. Martha's Church? Because it is known as the Circus Church, and one of the big memorial windows in there is in his honor. I
well,
thought that there was a
yeah,
connection.
the question is there a connection between St. Martha's Church and John Ringling? And the answer is not directly with John Ringling, but with the circus. Because the circus had, a lot of the performers were Catholics.
We
And,
still have a circus mass every January there.
oh, do they?
Yeah, one of the masses is at the end of January, around the time when they do the circus plaques out at St.
Oh,
Martha's.
okay.
Around that time, one of those days is Circus Day.
Right.
They have a special mass at St. Martha's.
Well, they also, so anyway, the circus would put on performances. And the money taken in from those performances is what gave them the money to build the current St. Martha's Church.
There was a little something, I wasn't sure.
There was another church there before that, on property donated by Owen Burns. And it was called St. Martha because Owen Burns' mother's patron saint was Martha. And I used to go to St. Martha's School, and I went to St. Martha's Church. And St. Martha's School was a 8-year program, but it took me 9 years to get out of it. And then I went on to Cardinal
Came
Mooney.
on Zoom just now, you better be careful.
Oh, I long ago stopped being embarrassed about it. But I went to Cardinal Mooney after that, and that was a 4-year program, but they asked me to leave after 3. So I finally graduated from Sarasota High School in 1964, much to my parents' amazement. So anyway, you also had the blessing of the Circus Trains. Monsignor L. Slander and his altar boys would meet at the train station before they pulled out and bless the trains for this, safe tour. They toured all over the country. And wherever the circus went, they advertised Sarasota, not only in placards on billboards, but in the programs, the circus programs themselves. And as a matter of fact, Ringling brought the circus here because of the crash. And, he was up to here with property to sell. And after the crash, there were not too many buyers. So he thought if he brought the circus, it would bring more people to town, which indeed it did, because the circus was the #1 tourist attraction in Florida until Disney World opened up.
I have a question,
Yes.
actually, and you may need to repeat it. I'm trying to make my voice loud. Someone on Zoom has asked about the Tamiami Trail. They're asking about the original pavement, but how did that evolve into all of these roundabouts that we have today? What's the evolution of that trail?
What is the evolution of the trail? The evolution of the trail is the city thought they could put 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack. And then when they determined they couldn't, they thought maybe that circles would rid the problem of traffic. But if you've been on that trail, it really hasn't. It's unbelievable. Yes.
This is a question that perhaps you know the answer to. I have yet to be able to find out, where was Charles Ringling's savings bank located in
Okay.
Sarasota? I
Where
know
was-
it's somewhere,
Where was Charles Ringling Bank located?
not John's, but
Charles.
not John, Charles.
Yeah. Charles Ringling Bank was located on the east side of Main Street, east of Lemon Avenue, east of the Gator Bar on the other side of the street, in that vicinity.
Okay. I'm sorry, that was.
No,
that's
don't be sorry.
a tough one for me to find.
Yeah,
A lot of references, but nobody ever had an address.
yeah.
I do here.
His bank, when John Ringling's bank closed, nobody got anything. When the other banks in the area closed for the Depression, maybe they'd get 10 or 18 cents on the dollar. And the only bank that paid dollar for dollar was Charles Ringling's bank. And that's because his wife put in her own money to make sure the depositors were paid. He had died, Charles had died by that point. He died in December of 26.
You mean an honorable person.
Yeah. Yeah, an honorable person. Any other questions? Come on, folks. I'm dying up here. Yeah, go ahead.
That Circus Street that goes through there across the
Yeah.
Publix. So, I mean, I really don't know enough about the history of Circus, but is that where they were, the winter on
Yeah.
that street?
Well,
Because
yeah,
there's the Jewish cemetery there?
where they were is where Glen Oak subdivision is today.
Oh, right on Geneva.
Yeah, it was called Oriente Avenue then,
Okay.
and that's where they were located.
But then
And-
you know where it says Circus Street, the Circus Avenue goes through?
Yeah,
Past the Jewish cemetery, with a fire department of
Yeah.
testing places.
yeah.
So what went on that street?
Well, there was a trailer park there, Circus City Trailer Park, for a long time. And I think that's what, I remember when I was a kid, I took horse riding lessons from Captain Heyer, who was a circus star. He had the horse starless night, and they would perform at the John Ringling Hotel. But he also had stables there and gave horse riding lessons.
Did you have another question? I did, and I'm sorry, it's not related to
No.
you, so I apologize. But what was the basis of the bad blood between Gillespie and Heigl?
You know, I know there was bad blood between them.
Because he also had kind
oh,
of had
what
a
was-
problem without too.
Yeah.
so-
Well,
So the question is, the urban lore is that there were bad relations between Heigl and Gillespie, and that's the question we've asked Jeff. Thank you.
well, I don't know. I'm surprised you even know there was a problem. Most people don't even know that. But I can't tell you. There's something to do with the books. Not that there was somebody was taking money, but Heigl wanted the books here, and maybe Gillespie when he went to Bradenton for a while. That's all I know. I'm sorry.
Because
I don't know.
Heigl had a problem with Rube Allen too, I mean, whatever those disagreements were, but Heigl seemed to have some problems with.
Well, he definitely had a problem with Rube
When he
Allen.
got died,
Yeah, he was tight. I mean, he was, every time you see him, he's wrapped kind of tight, and Rube Allen was wrapped kind of loose. You know, your canvas shoes, and you know, it's a whole different manner of man, long hair, and he was a thespian for a while and a lumberjack for a while, and he ended up being a well-regarded fisherman and fisherman's source. He had a magazine out, may have been called the Florida Fisherman. And I think that Rabonia was named after Rube Allen. So I think so, yeah.
there's a lady
Where
just
does the
like-
trail end? It starts, you said it starts in Tampa and.
Miami.
Yeah, so the question is the beginning and end of the trail. So Tamiami is Tampa to Miami.
Okay.
And that was, you know, so, um,
And the whole thing was done in 28.
No, it took years to do it. Many people thought it was impossible, you know, going through the swamps
Oh, right.
in the south. So they would have marksmen with them to kill whatever animal might approach them. And it was really brutal. And I'm not sure of the year they started. I want to say 1919, in that era after the war. And it was completed in 27, I think,
All the way or just?
all the way. Yeah.
So, now, is it used that much now as far
Yeah.
as?
Oh,
You
yeah.
go all the way to Miami, you go,
I know.
it's wonderful, you go all the way down to Naples and take 41 across, it goes right through the Everglades. It's a
Yeah.
great way to go.
It's a great way to travel.
Yeah,
So you don't have the traffic.
Oh, you don't have near the traffic.
there's no traffic, I've never seen.
An errant alligator every once in a while.
It's a great way to visit the Everglades because all the little, the tourist places to go on the Everglades trips are all 41. Yeah, oh, it's not a
So
little,
it's Route 41.
it's Route 41 goes all the way.
Yeah,
It's not a problem street, it's a great road.
yeah, it is.
All right.
Any other? Yes.
Thank you.
Hi Jeff,
Hi.
thank you. It's really informative. My question is, did John Ringling have any influence about the Sarasota School of Designers coming in like they have it and Tim Seeger?
The question is, did John Ringling have anything to do with the Sarasota School of Architects coming in? And the answer would be no. He died, Ringling died in 1936. He would have had an influence on Mediterranean revival architects with Baum, and Thomas Reed Martin did some work for him, but not the Sarasota School. That was kind of a post-World War II phenomenon. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you think about since your book is about the North Trail, it's not a question, but I had the opportunity last week for the first time in probably 16 or 17 years to go to an open house at the Ringling School of Art. And if any of you haven't been on that campus in the last 10 years, it is phenomenal.
Yeah, it
And
really
they do have
is.
an open house, I think, every 2 or 3. They had one last Friday where the students are all out there greeting you and taking you around. And I think they're having another one coming up, but
Yeah, okay.
the school is amazing. I don't think I've been on a campus in 10 years. The buildings, the art buildings, they're very wealthy. I know that. But it is, you should all go if you haven't been for a while.
So we're actually talking about one of the notable sites along the North Trail, which is today's Ringling College of Art and Design, which used to be called the Ringling School of Art. And one of our participants here is relating that she went to an open house there last week, and that monthly they opened the
I'm not
campus.
sure if it's monthly, but look online and you'll find when they have an open house.
Okay,
And it was like
regularly.
Friday from 5 to 8.
Okay,
And
regularly.
I
They-
don't know how often.
Okay,
But you
regular.
can go in and see students in the glass blowing play and
Oh,
see
great.
them running their
Oh,
printing
yeah.
machines. It was a 10+.
So they opened the campus and there are students there to greet you and show you their work. I've been to some of the gallery openings there, and it's just a really nice kind of intimate
Yes. It's like
experience
another whole
and a
museum.
lot of interaction with the
Yeah.
students. So let's see, I just was going to kind of ask a question, or maybe see if we could start a bit of a conversation, because it's always interesting to me, and when I walk around downtown with friends, to try to really understand how extensive the dredge and fill activities were here over the course of many years. So I'm not going to answer my own question for a change. I'm going to let the expert answer.
I'm not gonna answer it either. When Eleanor Roosevelt was in town, her uncle David Gray, who was an ambassador to Ireland, lived on Siesta for a while and then some other places, but she always called it man-made lands. She was always aware of Sarasota's man-made land. And take, for instance, Golden Gate Point. That was all dredged and filled by Owen Burns. Where Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall is now, that was dredged and filled. City Island, as we said before, Island Park was from dredge. So, you know, and the place that Mr. Smith did, not. So several developments on the bay's fringe were also filled. So yeah, there's quite a lot of that. Owen Burns had 2 dredges, the Mud Hen and the Sandpecker. And he's the one with Ringling that made Lido, you know, before it was kind of a bunch of disparate little islands. And he's the one that kind of brought them together. Owen Burns was. Yes.
Could you talk a little about how the trail was moved from its original location to where it is?
Yeah. That is. How when and how was the trail moved to where it is now? You're talking about the bayfront. Yeah, that a lot of people saw that as a tragedy. I'm one of those. Anyway, Sarasota's crown jewel has always been Sarasota Bay. And they came up with this proposal to dredge and fill up to Gulfstream Avenue, because the bay used to run right up to Gulfstream Avenue. So they filled all of that in. And the object was, when people were coming from out of town, they would drive along there and see the beautiful water and then maybe want to stay or vacation or whatever. Well, the problem was it just turned into a giant parking lot. You know, you can barely see the water from the 41 anymore. And it just cut off the bayfront from downtown. And when they were doing it, about 58 or 59, they were having an architectural convention in town. And Douglas Haskell, who editor of an architecture magazine said it looks like a monkey designed it. And what's the name of the guy who did it? Paul Rudolph said he couldn't believe that they would cut the crown jewel off from downtown. Anything? Any other questions? Well, then I guess I'm all spoke out. So if you want to buy the book, I'll be happy to sign copies.
The book is available downstairs at the cash register, so you go down there and purchase it, and bring it back up here, Jeff can set it at the table and sign. How about that?
Good.
Thank you.
Well,
all.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All good.